Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another session here for the fourth Phys Ed Summit, sponsored by the ESPEChat. My name is Benjamin Perillo, and I am going to be the moderator for this session. First of all, I want to thank the Phys Ed team for starting off the Phys Ed Summit and allowing ESPEChat to continue using it and helping them along the way and everything that involved with that. First of all, I want you to know that we're using a lot of technology, and could be some technology issues that will arise. And if they do, just kind of stick with us, and we will try to keep you posted via social media on the Twitter feed. So follow the SB Twitter feed. You can also check the website, and they'll try to update that as much as possible. We're also using a new piece of Padlet to go through. If you ever have any questions or you want to follow along with what's going on, feel free to go over there. We will hit up some questions towards the end of his session if you have any. So feel free to put them in there, and then we'll come back through when Will is ready, and we'll go through those. I think that's most of everything what I have. It's good to have everybody here. If you are posting things on social media, make sure you using the hashtags SBChat and Phys Ed Summit. So without further ado, I would like to introduce William Potter here for his session of developing relationships and connections in physical education. Go for it, Will.
Hey, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and jump in right away and do a share screen. Are we good?
No, not yet. There should be that on the left, the green share screen.
Did I not hit this? Oh, wait, hold on. There we go.
Perfect.
All right, we should be good now, right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right, so welcome to my session, Developing Relationships and Connections in the first 2 weeks. This is a session that's going to pretty much talk about what you can do in the first month of school to achieve buy-in from your community and from your students. So let's start with just talking a little bit about who I am. So my name is William Potter. I am starting my 14th year at Serendipity School in Belmont. I teach TK or pre-K all the way through 5th grades. I absolutely love my job. I love my students. And I mean, just look at them. Who wouldn't love faces as gorgeous as those? I'm a proud member of both Capered and Shape America. You should be, this is just going to be my little preach speech right now, but you should be a member of both of those organizations. They provide resources and support for you. And as a professional, they can do wonders for you. I am also a huge movie lover. I spent a lot of time when I'm not teaching PE, going to movies, talking about movies with friends. And I'm also a Superman super fan. Now, I am wearing a Batman shirt in this picture, but that 5th grade student, right before he graduated, said, "If I buy you a Batman shirt, will you wear it?" And when a 5th grader buys you a Batman shirt, you wear the Batman shirt. Doesn't matter how much you prefer Superman over Batman. Also to that note, I am a proud and honored physical educator. It is my career. It is what I love to do. And it is what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. And in case you weren't already aware, I worked at Blockbuster for nearly a decade. Now, right away, I want to talk about building relationships. Now, some of you may have seen this meme or this internet infographic going around. It's got 10 different things you can do to build a relationship with your students. But my favorite was number 6, tell hilarious and even embarrassing stories. So for the sake of building a relationship with you, the viewer, I'm going to tell a story about this one time when I was at a conference and I got trapped in a bathroom. Now, you might be saying, how do you get trapped in the bathroom? Well, it was a dorm, and it was a dorm-style bathroom. So I walked into the bathroom, did my business, went to leave, grabbed the handle to the main door, and the handle just completely broke off. And I was trapped in the bathroom. And I was pounding on the door because I was supposed to be at a session and I was really wanting to be there, and knocking and pounding on the door. And a couple people walk by and are like, what are you doing trapped in a bathroom? And I was like, the door broke. I need help. And they're like, well, is there a window? And I said, yeah. And of course, found a window, climbed out the window, and the rest is history. Of course, the people who found me and helped me out the window would never let me forget it. And the entire conference was like, hey, where's Will? I don't know. Where is Will? Do you think he got trapped in a bathroom? And it went on and on. Now, it might sound strange for me to tell you this story, but shared stories is what connects us as community. It builds community. And shared experiences with your students bond you with your students, and shared experiences with them bond each other together as well. So connection before content, it's a huge thing. Some of you may have seen this Newsweek article or Education Week article that came out a few weeks ago. Connection before content is huge. Every time you connect with a student, you create a community. Even if it's just a community of two, a community is vital for the development of a child. And kids want to know that you care. I'm going to show you this quick little video about LeBron and his new school.
Kids just want to know if we care about them. They have the dreams, they have the aspirations. They just want to know that someone cares. As adults, we have a responsibility to not let these kids down, to continue to be the teachers, the mentors, the parents, the coaches, the superheroes, everything. That's our responsibility. I know the ups, the downs. I know everything that they dream about. I know all the nightmares that they have because I've been there.
I think that video is super powerful and important, especially the part where they talk about the family dynamic, or the we are family and the building of community. Kids don't embrace you because you're an authority figure. They embrace you because you say good morning when you see them first thing. When they have a terrible day, you sit and you listen to them about it without judgment. You make them feel safe and you let them share who they are. That's what why kids will embrace you. Kids want an authority figure, and they want to respect you right off the bat. But if you don't respect them back and you don't connect with them, they're not going to listen to your message. Most teachers, of course, will put their needs, put students' needs before their own. They'll embrace and accept, that idea of, I got to put my oxygen mask on before I, put the others. But they also will help students gain and advance before they will sometimes take care of themselves. And of course, it doesn't happen overnight, and there's no magic pill, and it's not about the intensity of it, but rather the consistency of that message. So, how does this look in my classroom? Well, whenever possible, I give my students a choice. Now, the way I do this at the beginning of the year is with a choice warm-up. At the beginning of the year, I choose fitness activities: jump rope, jogging, hula hoop, and of course, the ever popular Serendipity Stairmaster, which is just a set of stairs near my playground, but kids go up and down with it for the entire 5 minutes. They perform the choice that they make for the first 5 minutes, and then they take their pulse. So we're getting a little bit of content and cognitive aspect of fitness as well. With each unit, the choices change. So, for example, in a basketball unit, we might be doing a dribbling station, a passing station, a shooting station, and a plyometric station, something to mix it up. Choice warm-up is a way of saying to my students that I trust them to responsibly come into class and work independently towards their goals. So all of these activities are designed for students to take ownership of their learning. They're not passive participants, they're active participants, not just in what they do and their participation level, but in how they are internalizing the learning. So after warm-up, my students will then grab a quick drink. Now, I don't want to lose valuable teaching time during this transition. So for those who don't get water, or those who get water quickly and they're waiting for the others to finish, we utilize the time with a stretch and discuss portion. Now, stretch and discuss minutes are my way of taking advantage of those built-in transition times, water breaks and down times that can, whittle away at your lesson time. But if you're actively using those minutes, then you're better off. The biggest thing I like to do during my stretch and discuss time is what's called an anticipation guide. Now, an anticipation guide is a way of allowing students to collaborate with peers and enhance their learning experience. I write a statement in the center box, and students can either agree or disagree with the statement after they discuss it with the partner or with a group of friends. Then, after they've made a decision whether they agree or disagree on the statement, they take a magnetic marker and they move it. They can move it to the appropriate box. Now, I've shown this before, and people are like, "Oh, this would be great to use with my Plagnets," which is great. It's fine. But just remember that I like to use multiple statements so that there's multiple choices. So they may have to have multiple Plagnets if you use Plagnets. I also like that it's anonymous, and students don't feel like they have to give the right answer, but rather the answer they feel is right with each other, rather than what they think I want to hear. So that's an anticipation guide. So after we do our stretch and discuss time, I take my students over to my board area. Now, my board area and my board time is a part of my daily routine where students are primed for the day's lesson. It includes teaching elements that I think are important for my students to see and know. Students here will be recognized, they'll discover our anatomy of the week and get focused for the lesson. The things that I like to include in my board time are a few solid elements. Now, these elements all together probably take me about 3 minutes. If I go longer than 3 minutes, it's because I talked too much. So I include a student of the week in this board. I'll take a photo of students throughout the week. I'll find a student who best represents an ideal or something we're working towards as a goal, and that student will be student of the week. All week, they'll get high fives from the community, shout outs, great job for being student of the week. And then at the end of the week, I will write a note on the back of the picture and give it to the student to take home. I also have my Awesome Anatomy program. You can see there that it's just basically a worksheet blown up to poster size, and then we fill that out together. And it's a great way of disseminating anatomical information and body composition information out to my students, because it's not just what your body composition is, it's about knowing what body composition is and knowing what your body is. And then also a quote of the week. Quote of the week has always been important to me. I always try to make it character-driven, growth mindset related, or SEL specific. And then I also on my board have a reminder to be squirrel strong. Thanks, Jim DeLine, for that nugget. And then my school's motto, which is think clear. Now, I know think clear isn't exactly grammatically correct, but it's actually an acronym. So what does it mean to think clear? Well, my school has what's called expected school-wide learning results, or ESLERs. And at Serendipity, we've adopted the acronym of CLEAR. And CLEAR stands for creative and perceptive thinkers or learners, lifelong learners, effective communicators, academically enriched individuals, and respectful community members. So whenever I'm designing a lesson or I'm looking at my lesson focus, my why, so to speak, I want these letters to be incorporated in that. And that's important too. Connecting your lessons with your school philosophy is going to emphasize that your space is also a learning environment. Students won't come out to the playground and think recess. They'll come out to the playground and think, oh, this is a class. I'm going to be here to learn, not just to play. Part of my learning experience for my students is physical literacy and goal setting. I want my students to become independent learners. And part of that process is allowing them to create and work towards individual goals. When I created my goal setting sheets, I made sure to include the Yeti poster from Joey Fight and the physical educator. I also wanted to include the SMART acronym, S-M-A-R-T, and what each part of that means so that my students can check their goals for quality. I look over their goals throughout the semester, and I check in with them on their progress. But I do it not to grade them or to assess their completion percentage, but to keep them focused and celebrate their successes. I have another video.
I'm very, very interested in the idea of playing in games that have no finish lines, right? Some games have finish lines, right? Baseball, football, right? Getting a part is a finish line. You audition, there's a beginning, middle, and end. There's rehearsal and practice. There's showing up for the audition, and you either win or you lose, and then it's over. It's over, right? That is finite. But one's career is infinite. There's no end. It's like our lives are finite, but life is infinite. People come and people go, but life continues, right? Theater, actors come and actors go, but theater continues. It's infinite. You don't win theater. You win a part, but what happens once you get the part? The finite game is over. Now you enter the infinite game. You have to be able to convert, right? And the reason this is important, and I've seen this unfortunately so many times, from a young age, all you wanted to do was get to Broadway. And then you get to Broadway. And then what? You've devoted your entire life to one finite goal, and when you get there, the immediate response is depression. Because I spent 15 years of my life for this one thing, and I got it. And now I don't know what to do next. Like, get to Broadway again. Doesn't have the same ambition. It doesn't have the same passion. You know, you've devoted you're from Fargo, North Dakota, and that's all you wanted to do was get out of Fargo and make it to Broadway, and you made it, right? It doesn't have the same kind of passion. And this is because these are finite goals. There's a lot of studies that have been done with athletes who have finite goals to become the greatest X in the world, right? So Andre Agassi was one of these athletes. He wanted to become the greatest tennis player that ever lived. Guess what? Everyone in his life, he would view them through, how do you help me get to that? Everything was, how does this help me get to that? Everything was a transaction. How do you help me move to there? And then you know what happens? He achieved it. He became the greatest tennis player in the world. And you know what happened immediately after? Depression. Michael Phelps set out to become the most medaled Olympian in history. Do you know what? He achieved it. You know what happened immediately after? Depression. They spend their whole life working for one goal. Though most will never get it, the few that do don't know what to do next because their goals were finite. Their goals were finite. Right? And so there are finite components to your career, but your career should be infinite. So yes, of course you have to win the finite game. You have to get the part. But immediately when you get the part, now you convert to infinite.
Seriously though, how powerful is that message of when you're setting goals, don't focus on one thing. Don't put those blinders on. See the bigger picture. Go beyond when you get that goal. Ask yourself, all right, I got to this goal. What's next? Where can I go from here? I think it's really important, and I think it's really powerful. And I just saw this video over the summer, and I instantly saw it and was like, I can't wait to bring this to school and show my students on how, when we're talking about how to set a goal and what does it mean to be a goal, but to show them this and be like, don't make your goals finite. Don't be that person that's like, I want to shoot 10 baskets and make 10 baskets in a row. Take it to the next level. Take it and make it infinite, and make an infinite goal rather than a completion goal. But it's really important to encourage your students to keep focused on their goals and achievements. I like to say, I want to be your teammate and your accomplice in these goals. I don't want to be a hindrance. I don't want to block you. I want to help you. I want to get you to that next level. I want to be your biggest cheerleader, so to speak. So now I'm going to take you through some team building activities and some things I do in the first 2 weeks that helps build that community. And the first one is this activity I call Tethered Together. A lot of people call it the river crossing challenge, and they use stepping stones, and some people call it, Titanic, like use the cheese to get across the river or the lake or whatever. I like to use hula hoops, and I like to use jump ropes. And students have to stay tethered together with the jump rope. So every student has to have one hand on one of the jump ropes that has been provided to the group. Now they can work in as big or as small groups as possible. The smaller your group is, the easier it's going to be for them to get across, because you can obviously work better in 2s than you can in 4s or in 8s or in 16s. But my biggest emphasis during this activity is that they have to work together. They have to come up with a plan, and they have to make success happen together. Now, what I don't tell them is that I've spaced the hoops just far enough apart from each other that if they don't jump together, they won't make it across together. In other words, the ropes aren't long enough to make it so you could stand in 2 hoops at the same time. You have to be jumping together in order to get to those hoops. It's fascinating. And another thing I like to do during this activity is I'll throw a blindfold on one of the students. And that forces them to build trust together. Most blindfold activities, you don't want to jump right to the beginning with, I'm going to blindfold you, and you don't trust your partner yet, and you haven't built that trust with them. But once they've started building trust within their group, you can throw blindfolds on them, and it enhances that trust factor even more. So then the next challenge activity that I like to throw out there is this activity. I have a box plus a lock, and I give my students these codexes. Now this activity, when you combine all these activities together, you get the activity of Code Breaker. Now Code Breaker is a team building activity that encourages students to work together to solve a problem cooperatively. Now the task varies from class to class or lesson to lesson or whatever I want to do. But essentially, in order to get clues, students have to perform a physical activity. Jumping jacks, push-ups, burpees. It could be throwing and catching. It could be any activity I choose it to be. Once they get the clue, they can combine it with the other clues to get their code. Now, your code isn't useful until you break it, and that's where the codices come in. I use 2 different codices, either the basic alphanumerical A1 Z26 cipher, or another one, the ROT13 alpha to alpha cipher, where the A equals the N and the Z equals, the 13th letter of the alphabet. So there's each letter represents another letter. So if you have A, it could be N. If you have N, it could be A. And if you have B, it could be O. And if you have O, it could be B. From there, students must perform the task. From there, students must decipher the code and then apply it to the lock in order to get into the box. So it's kind of a way of adding a little fitness to breakout ED activities. So that's that activity. And I really like this activity because you'll have students who aren't necessarily very strong physically, but who understand the mental capacity it takes to break the code. And now all of a sudden they become the leaders of the activity. And of course, the collaborative nature of team building challenges always teach students how to work together more effectively. Now, when it comes to team building, I always ask my students, what kind of teammate are they? Are you a user who takes from others to get what they want? So I want this, you're going to help me get there, and I'm not going to reciprocate anything. I'm just going to use you to get what I need. Are you a confuser? Now, sometimes we can be intentionally confusing or unintentionally confusing. That happens too. But you're essentially a confuser is someone who disrupts the group and slows progress either because they are trying to or because they don't understand and they're stuck. And then we have the abusers. Now, a lot of people who get frustrated become abusers and don't even realize it. But an abuser is a person who intimidates teammates to get their way or takes out frustrations on others either physically or verbally. Abusers are really dangerous, and you have to watch out for those, because if they're an abuser, sometimes that's where physical altercations will happen in a team building setting. So it's really important that you squash that activity before it really gets out of hand. And then, of course, the last one are the producers. I think producers make the best leaders. Producers lift others and help teammates towards goals. They don't focus on what they can get from others, but rather they help others along. And that's really who I think make the best leaders. And of course, working with others is a lifelong skill. You have to give your students the tools and allow them the opportunities to work out problems before you step in. A lot of times we as teachers rely on rock, paper, scissors to solve problems a lot. And it's important to have that as a tool. I'm not saying you shouldn't have that and your students shouldn't know how to solve problems that way, but we rely on it too much. It's not a real world tool, and using it too often is kind of taking away from our students' ability to solve problems face to face on the playground. Get off my soapbox, but that's just what I think. Eventually you can break it down that way, and if they do it on their own, that's fine. But really, that face-to-face interaction, whenever there's a conflict, I think is really important to let them discuss and hash it out, so that they have those tools and skills to be able to solve problems in the real world. Because in the real world, if I've got somebody and we get into a car accident, I'm not going to be like, whose fault was it? It's your fault. And no, it's your fault. Oh, let's Rochambeau to see whose fault it is. That's not really a real world tool. So going back to the idea of what kind of teammate are you, there's two things I want to do with my team building activities. And first is to give my students opportunity to work together. That way they form their own little communities. And then also I want to give each student the opportunity to be a leader. All of my students can be leaders, whether they are outgoing or whether they are shy, whether they are introverts or extroverts. It doesn't matter. Leaders are not the boss. Being a leader is more than just telling others what to do. Leadership is not about being first in line or being the smartest or the fastest or even being the bravest to try something. Leadership is a skill. It's a trait that can be developed, and the best leaders are always learning to be better leaders. Now, this is another quote from Simon Sinek, which I think is one of the best things I've ever heard, which is basically, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you're a leader. You're not necessarily the first person to jump across the bridge in a team building challenge. You're not the person who instantly jumps out and does something, but you can inspire others and that's being a leader. And when I talk about leaders, and when I was thinking about leaders, it got me thinking about what is a real leader and what is a real hero. And earlier in this year, my students worked on a culmination wax museum project. Many of them became fascinated with historic figures that they were set to study. Some of them chose famous figures like Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, George Washington. Some of them picked a little bit different heroes like Jackie Robinson and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it was those ideas that really inspired me to do something. One girl picked Hedy Lamarr. Now, if you're not familiar with Hedy Lamarr, you might be thanking her right now for this presentation. She is one of the pioneers of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth technology. She was also a major Hollywood actress. Now, the reason she fascinates me is because I had never heard of her before this student chose her as her project. And it really inspired me to go into looking at different people who are actually really heroic and leaders in their own way. So I desperately wanted to include these unsung heroes into my curriculum, but I couldn't figure out how. And so I was social mediating it one day, and Mike Ginicola put up his superhero Monopoly game. And I was like, oh, that's totally what I'll do. So instead of using fictional superheroes, I use these real life heroes because real life heroes don't wear capes. And I think it's important that we teach that. So I created these hero cards that you can see right here. And these hero cards basically have a fitness activity attached and a mini biography around it. Now, the way that the game is played is that each student or each group of students is given a hero card. Now, this is just like bingo, but instead of trying to get bingos with fitness, they're trying to get bingos with these hero facts. Now, in order to write the fact about the hero down, they have to also properly perform the fitness challenge attached. And then once they get a horizontal row, a vertical row, or a diagonal row, they'll get a point. Now, if they get all the horizontal, which is 4 points, and all the vertical, which is 8 points, and then both diagonals, they'll get a total of 10 points. But because they got a blackout also, I'll give them a 5 bonus points. And that's really all that hero bingo is. And instead of superheroes and fitness activities, I chose real heroes and fitness activities. Now, of course, the concept of leadership and teamwork is only successful when you allow students to apply that knowledge practically. Now, if you want to see your success applied on the playground, you can watch it in an informal setting just by going to recess. But how do you assess that in a more structured, formal setting? And for me, the answer was to utilize that, create a game concept that was around social media and the Chop Challenge at Shape America. And that was my answer. This is great. I can watch students play and become teammates and group members while also assessing their ability to do so. So for this activity, usually I give students a topic or skill and a plan sheet. They'll work together in small groups to create a game that teaches the skill or the topic given. So for example, the red team might be cardiovascular endurance, and they have to create a game that teaches that. Orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, et cetera, et cetera. Now, for this activity, equipment is shared by all, and if taken from the pile, they either need to use it or return it. In a class, I give each group about 15 to 20 minutes to collaborate and create, and then 3 minutes to present. And the remaining time is left playing the games that they want to play that they created. So real quickly, here's a sample from the basketball unit I did. And these are kindergartners, and their focus was passing. This is the section where they're demonstrating or showing off their activity to the rest of their classmates.
So how you play is you try to make it not touch the jump ball. If it doesn't touch it, that means you get a point. But if it does touch it, that means you have to go all the way to the end of the line And if it doesn't touch it, that means you get a point. Okay, then go.
I love the way that she explains the activity. And for a kindergarten level, she does a very exceptional job of explaining what their activity is. Of course, as they get older, I'm going to expect more cues and more keys of the skill. And I may actually incorporate fitness on top of the basketball, fitness concept on top of the basketball that they have to incorporate. But for kindergarten level, I was super impressed. And this is one of those activities that I didn't think kindergarten can do. And my kindergarten class last year like blew me away. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But giving your students the freedom to apply their teamwork skills practically will encourage them to use those skills in their free time. So not only will they take those activities and show them to you, but on the playground, they'll be using those same activities and those same tools that you've taught them. One of my favorite things to do with students is to ask them what their favorite mistake was. So what was the favorite mistake you made today? Favorite mistakes are mistakes you're glad you made because they taught you something. We love to share the concept of growth mindset and encourage our students to have a growth mindset. We always celebrate when our students overcome an obstacle and we praise the outcome, but I think sometimes that we forget to encourage the process. My favorite mistake is a way of encouraging the process. Like, oh, I made this mistake. It taught me something. Celebrate the hard times and the stumbling blocks as well as the super successes. Because are mistakes failure or are they opportunity? That's just the bottom line. Are you encouraging students to learn from their mistakes, or are they getting down and about their mistakes? Guiding through students through mistakes, it's easy to say that they have a growth mindset, but if you don't allow them to make mistakes and you punish them for mistakes rather than guide them, they won't grow, and more often than not, they'll lie or they'll cover up or deny their mistakes, and they won't take ownership of those mistakes. And that goes for character mistakes too, not just physical mistakes or learning mistakes. If a student is acting out in class looking for attention, of course you want to address that, but you want to address it in a way that teaches them that that's inappropriate and why that's inappropriate. And there's another video I have here that talks a little bit about growth mindset.
My contention is all kids have tremendous talents and we squander them pretty ruthlessly. I had a great story recently, I love telling it, of a little girl who was in a drawing lesson. She was 6 and she was at the back drawing, and the teacher said this little girl hardly ever paid attention. And in this drawing lesson, she did. And the teacher was fascinated. She went over to her and she said, "What are you drawing?" And the girl said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the girl said, "They will in a minute." Kids will take a chance. If they don't know, they'll have a go. Am I right? They're not frightened of being wrong. Now, I don't mean to say that being wrong is the same thing as being creative. What we do know is, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. If you're not prepared to be wrong. And by the time they get to be adults, most kids have lost that capacity. They have become frightened of being wrong. And we run our companies this, by the way. We stigmatize mistakes. And we're now running national education systems where mistakes are the worst thing you can make. And the result is that we are educating people out of their creative capacities. If you think of it, the whole system of public education around the world is a protracted process of university entrance. And the consequence is that many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not, because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. And I think we can't afford to go on that way. Picasso once said this. He said that all children are born artists. The problem is to remain an artist as we grow up. I believe this passionately, that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or rather, we get educated out of it. We have to be careful now that we use this gift wisely, and the only way we'll do it is by seeing our creative capacities for the richness they are, and seeing our children for the hope that they are. And our task is to educate their whole being so they can face this future. By the way, we may not see this future, but they will. And our job is to help them make something of it.
Now, of course, the video is talking about art and, creativity as an artist. But what are you doing in your classes to encourage creativity of movement, to encourage students to be creative in how they move and what they move? A great thing that I like to refer to my students is, the older students always, when you're in a basketball unit, oh, you should shoot, with the proper form. And of course, yes, you should shoot with the proper form. But then I also remind them that, Rick Barry, one of the greatest free throw shooters in the history of basketball, used to shoot with the underhand grandma method or grandpa method of shooting free throws. And he was just as successful. You have to do what works for you, not just what's proper. And being creative in your thought and making those mistakes and finding out different ways of moving is really the basis of creative movement. Fear of failure is toxic. It creates anxiety. If you're constantly telling your students that they're wrong because they're moving in a certain way, you're just teaching them that they're going to tense up and they're going to be afraid to make those mistakes. So teach that idea of growth mindset, especially when it comes to creative movement, and you'll remove that anxiety and gain their trust so that they'll listen to you and maybe find better ways of moving instead of freaking out and cramming up. Now, the end of my classes every day, I like to do 3 things. And these 3 things I think are super important. The first is I go back to my message of clear. And I ask my students, how did you think clear today? What did you do to be a creative and perceptive thinker? What did you do to be a lifelong learner? What did you do to be an effective communicator? What did you do today that was academically enriched? And what did you do today that made you a respectful community member? Now, a lot of times they'll struggle and they'll come up with strange ideas, but a lot of times they won't. A lot of times they'll come up with things that you never even thought of. For example, I ask this question of my students every day, and one day I was an effective communicator because I was quiet and I listened to my teammates. Now, that's a fantastic answer, but in an activity where you're supposed to be shouting out answers to your teammates, maybe that's not exactly what you had in mind when you were asking that question. You might be surprised at the answers you get. And that's one of the reasons why I like to ask that. I also like to ask my students what they discovered about themselves. Same activity, a student said, I discovered that I have difficulty hearing more than one person at a time. So I need to focus and listen to one person at a time. Fantastic answer, right? You find that students discover a little bit more about themselves every day that they do an activity in class. And self-discovery is important, especially in PE, because that's how they find out what they're good at. And the last thing I like to do is I like to allow my students to praise each other. I'm proud of who, I'm proud of you. It's a statement that I have all of my students say to one of their classmates. I always ask them to share that with another student rather than with me or with the class as a group. I ask them to do it one-on-one. Look towards each other, find a person who you saw go above and beyond in class, and I also remind them to be specific with their praise and let the students know why they're proud of them. It's a fantastic way to build community. It's a fantastic way for students to really look at what everybody else is doing without being super judgmental or without being negative. I really think it's important to give students a voice and a chance to share because it empowers them and keeps them engaged in the class. They have buy-in because they are a part of the learning. They are leading this journey, and I am just the guide that takes them where they need to go. That's something that I think is really vital and really important when it comes to building that community. Nobody wants to be told what to do, but they definitely would like to know what to do if they feel like they are in charge. And that's it. So thank you for joining me for this ESPEChat and Phys Ed Summit. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. You can reach me on my Twitter, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I also have a website, and that QR code right there will take you right to my website. So if you have any questions or you want to see any of the things I do in action, you can absolutely go there and see everything. I think now is probably a good time to take some questions.
So, yeah, you have any questions for Will? Now's a great time. I haven't seen anything really pop up on the Padlet. So if you have any questions, write them in there, and he'll be happy to answer them. Looks like we got some coming up.
All right. So for those who probably want to know how often I see my students, I see my 2nd through 5th graders for an hour twice a week. And then kindergarten, pre-K, I see once a week for 30 minutes. Kindergarten, twice a week for 45. And 1st grade, twice a week for 50. So I know a lot of times when I've done this presentation in the past, people have asked me what my contact time looks like. So I just thought I'd throw that out there while we're waiting for questions.
Perfect. And you kind of answered it, but someone asked, do you do all these with every grade?
So I will do variations with every grade. The box and locks is mostly 4th and 5th, but I will do something similar where they get the ball and they bring it back and they get a point. So it may not be a team building with the math, but it is with the same activity. The Real Hero Bingo, same thing. I've done that all the way down to kindergarten. Now, kindergarten, it might be, just write a check mark when you find that person, or write a check mark when you find 3 scientists or something like that. Because that's how it's a rainbow set of, 13 or sorry, a rainbow set of 3 each color. And, there's 3 reds, which are activists, 3 oranges, which is athletics. Purple is artists. Blue is authors. So there's different categories, and I make them find each category. So it's simplified so that there's not as much confusion for the little ones. And then obviously you can do the tethered challenge modified just based on how far you think they can jump, or how far how much you want them to be connected, all the way down to kindergarten.
All right, now before I go to this next question, because a lot of people commented about the when you talked about real life heroes and using everyday people. Is that resource on your website? Is that somewhere where they can? Is that where they can go get that?
It's completely downloadable on my website. You can get all 18 cards that I have. Print them out. I printed mine out and laminated them so I can use them over and over again. The other thing that I did was when I make groups, especially at the beginning of the year, I take 2 halves of a whole and I make them combine it. So I might have a picture of a basketball and I cut that sucker right in half, and then they have to combine it in order to find the basketball for their partner. So what I did was I took those cards and I sliced them up the middle, and then you have one partner who has the biography and another partner who has the picture, and they have to combine that in order to find who their partner is. It's another great activity you can do with those cards.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. So someone is wondering, do the students name one of the clear aspects or each one of them?
I will, as a group, ask them to raise their hand if they want to share how they thought C, L, E, A, or R. Sometimes they'll be like, okay, I want you to high five 5 of your classmates and tell them how you thought, and each classmate has to be a different letter. It just depends on how much time I want to spend at the end of my lesson on that. Obviously, if we're having a tough SEL day, I'll spend a little bit more time on that closure aspect, because that's where I think the real learning happens, in that closure. And a lot of times I'll see a classroom teacher coming out like, let's go. And I'm like, nah, we're going to wait. I want to hear these questions. So sometimes I'm not a teacher's favorite friend. Administration has come out on a couple occasions and said, okay, well, we're going to put your recesses at the end of your classes so that, if you want your students to move, then you're going to have to shut it down quicker. But for the most part, I make sure to adjust for time. So if we only get one that day, we only get one that day. And then I'll just make sure that they're all thinking about it in their head beginning of the day.
Cool. Yeah, and I think we had talked about this the other day. In the past, I've never really started with cooperative activities. I've always had like movement and getting back into the routine. But the last, I think, 2 years, I started doing more cooperative stuff. And I think you're right. It really helps to build that relationship with the students and reaching out to them. But then it also helps build that climate in your classroom, like learning to work together and cooperate one another and how do we communicate. And I'm so thankful that I changed it. Definitely changed all the routine. And we really liked your graph that had the 4 roles.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people were like, I was trying to snip it as we were going and putting pictures in Padlet, and I missed it. I was like, oh no! So somebody went back and
right.
Yeah, somebody went back to it and snipped it and put it in there. So it's in the Padlet, which is really cool. But yeah, and that was a really cool concept, seeing all the different.
Yeah, well, and the thing
roles.
is about that is too, like, depending on the activity, you might be a different thing. You're not always going to be a producer. When you're frustrated or you're confused, you might be that abuser. You might be that confuser, because of the situation, and you're not comfortable, and it's pushing past that discomfort zone and learning, oh, I need to work on this. When I'm frustrated, I become an abuser, or when I'm confused, I intentionally go off to the side and try to make my friends goof off because I'm confused and I'm not having a good time or whatever. I think it's important that students recognize that being a producer isn't, you don't have to be perfect to be a producer. Just like the other 3 aren't, evil, so to speak. They're just things that you become. They're when you're challenged or when you're pushed in this direction, what do you respond with? And as long as my students aren't constantly being users, I'm usually pretty happy, because I think users are probably the most, for lack of a better word, they're the least cooperative in a cooperative learning environment, because they're only out for themselves. They're not out to help anyone as a group. A lot of times abusers get frustrated because they're not successful, or they're frustrated because they're not being heard. And confusers are confused because they didn't understand the activity, or they're not paying attention, and so they miss something, so they're asking a friend, which is then kind of confusing other people. But the users, I feel like, are the least productive members of a group. So I'm happy if my students aren't users.
That's cool. Now, do you have with that graph, because somebody made a comment, I'm like, oh, that'd be really cool. Do you have, with the different steps, do you have like the definition of what each step, it's not a step, what each position is? You know what I'm trying to say? So
yeah.
like you have your user and like the definition of what a user is.
No, but that's a really good idea. That's actually, I took that idea from a classroom setting. It was a classroom board. And that said, when you're working in a group, are you one of these 4 things? And I was like, oh, that's a genius thing for cooperative learning. And so I took a picture of it, and it sat in my computer until I was putting together this slideshow. And when I put together the slideshow, I was like, oh, I'm totally going to pull that out. But I think that's great. I'm probably going to create some posters that have that graphic, and then what each one is underneath it. So whoever put that question out there, thank you very much.
Well, cool. And I think I probably asked more questions. I don't see any other questions. So the clear concept is pretty cool. A lot of people like that too. So
yeah, and that is my school's philosophy. That's that's just something that I adopted from the school I'm at. Now, I probably will take that if I ever left the school I'm at, which I'm not planning to. But if I ever left the school I was at, I probably would take that with me. But it's also, I think, important that you tie into your own school's message. Like when I was in middle school, we had pride as our motto, and each PRIDE stood for something else. So I think whatever your school philosophy is, it's important to tie that in there, like I said, because it turns your playground into a learning environment, and they're reminded of what's expected of them as learners, not just going out to the playground to play recess or whatever. And I teach outside exclusively. I don't have a gym. So recess is outside, PE is outside, morning time is outside, and having students understand that that's a learning environment on top of a play space is really important to me.
So let me double check one more time, so make sure no other questions popped up. Nope. I think that's it. So
Well, thanks to ESPEChat, and thanks for the people that put this on. I really appreciate them inviting me to come over.
Yeah, and we definitely appreciate the chat, and make sure you check out some of the other ones are coming up. So stay tuned. There's a lot more good ones, and thank you, Will, for presenting. Fantastic stuff. This was awesome. I hope everybody enjoyed it. It looked like a lot of good comments. So
all right,
thanks, Will.
Thank you.